And I come to realize that I had a drinking problem. You know, I never wanted to admit that I had a drinking problem. No, I was not an alcoholic. I didn't have to get up and I didn't have to drink every day. But when I decided to drink, I could turn into a whole another person, you know. I was a person like if I get alcohol in my system and it get boring where I lived at, I would hit the highway and go straight to Dallas. And then I will figure out how did I make it to Dallas on the interstate. So that is one point with a negative mindset and living in a town that doesn't have much going on, that I had a drinking problem. And then I had to own up to my responsibility of taking someone's life. And this didn't really come to realization to me until I'm going to say about 2019, after I gave my life to God and different things, you know. I was sitting in my bunk and I was taking notes and different things, and you know, and actually I was on the phone and I had got a phone call and I was talking to my daughter, you know, my youngest, and then I talked to her mother and she told me to be expecting a letter, you know, from my victim, you know, my good friend Annie, you know, and she wrote me a long letter and she, you know, she asked me to forgive her, you know, for her feeling the way I feel for taking her nephew's life, you know, and in different things. You know, she turned her life over to the Lord, and, you know, and some of her church members and her pastor told her before she can move on and become a child of God, you know, she have to forgive me. You know, she's holding a grudge and, you know, she just, you know, just felt some way about me because I took her nephew life, even though, you know, I done took him down there several times to visit, you know, when his dad was living, and to take him down there to visit them, and she knew I was a good person. But, you know, I know how a person feel when you take their family member's life, you know, so, and different things. So she wrote me that letter and she just asked me for forgiveness, you know. And then, you know, I sat down and, you know, I thought about it for a couple of days, and then, you know, I sat down and I wrote her a long letter, you know, and different things. And I told her, you know, that I forgive her, but she don't need my forgiveness. I'm asking you for my forgiveness for taking your nephew away from you and taking your family member away from you, and not to be able to see him grow old, to, you know, see him have kids or whatnot, to be, you know, a father, grandfather, whatever he may be in life, you know, as he was a good friend, you know. And then she ended up writing me a letter back, and, you know, and that was it, you know. But that day, that changed my entire life, how I looked at life, you know. And I got on my knees, you know, and I asked God into my heart, and I asked God to change me, you know, to just change me, you know, to take the desires of alcohol, the desires of fast women, desires of the street life, you know, to remove anyone out my life who is not for me. And, you know, those 4 or 5 years was the hardest years of my life, you know, because I really just didn't know what happened. And the thing about this here is, what I want to get y'all to see is, you know,